you'll see me here a lot. So I'm going to stand down here because there's a small furniture store in front of the screen. I don't want to add to that. So I'm going to start very broadly this morning. First with a primer on the global economy. I'll then quickly taper down into national level economic data. I'll then share with you data specific to regions around the country with, of course, a deeper dive into Baltimore and Washington data. I'll talk about energy markets, financial markets, labor markets, real estate and construction markets, all manner of markets, before concluding with a forecast for the balance of 2019 and beyond. I've entitled the presentation to All the Economists I Loved Before. It's a play on a song that came out in 1984. By the way, this day in 1984, Ronald Reagan defeated Walter Mondale to be reelected, as it turns out. But also in 1984, that song came out, To All the Girls I've Loved Before, featuring Julio and Willie Nelson. And when that song came out, it went to number 4 on the Billboard 100 in the US, number 1 in Canada, but perhaps most impressively raced to number 1 on the country music charts in the US, which no one thought that Julio Iglesias could accomplish, as he is born in Madrid, Spain. This also helped to spawn a period of unusual pairings. Diversity is strength. You might remember just 2 years later, Run DMC comes together with Aerosmith, do a remake of Walk This Way. That's almost went to number 4 in the US, number 6 in Canada, but raced up to number 1 on the R&B music charts in the US, which no one thought that Aerosmith could accomplish because of who they are, and also because by the mid-1980s, they had largely become irrelevant to American rock and roll due to a combination of individual and group dysfunction. And I'd love to continue to talk about these things, much more entertaining than talk about the economy. It actually fits more neatly with a casino setting. But MBIA insists I talk about the economy. Let me turn to that. And I think the major question on everyone's mind is the same. How long will this last? This is already the lengthiest economic expansion in American history, year 11. Every previous expansion has ended with an economic downturn. This one will too. And because we haven't had a recession for quite some time, because we're in year 11, one might simply think that it's time for a recession. One of the things I want to do for you this morning is I want to use quotes from various economists I've loved before on a professional basis, to serve as transitional mechanisms from one part of the presentation to the next. So with respect to the question, when will the next recession occur, our former Federal Reserve Chairwoman, Janet Yellen, says, well, there's always some chance of recession in any year. That is a decidedly unhelpful statement. There is no predictive power, there's no value whatsoever. But the second part that really matters, but the evidence suggests that expansions don't die of old age, close quote. Now what the research indicates is that whether we're in the second year of economic expansion, the 4th year, the 6th year, the 8th year, or now the 11th, that duration has very little, if any, predictive power with respect to the timing of the onset of the next economic downturn. That said, there have been some omens. Everyone here understands that the yield curve recently inverted. For instance, with the yield on the 2-year recently rising above the yield on the 10-year, but there have been some other omens. That red line there represents the natural rate of unemployment. It's a notional concept, a theoretical construct. The notion being that anytime the actual rate of unemployment, here featured in purple, falls below the natural rate, that triggers problematic inflationary pressures, wage pressures, supply chain vulnerability, so on and so forth. Just not enough workers to do the work profitably. The purple line again represents periods, or I should say the actual rate of unemployment dating back to 1975, and then you can't really see it, but there's some slight gray shade areas here that represent periods of recession dating back to 1975. So the issue emerges when the purple line, the actual rate of unemployment, dips below the red line, the natural rate of unemployment, which occurred prior to the onset of the 1980 recession, which was followed by the 81-82 recession, occurs yet again prior to the onset of the 1991 recession, occurs yet again prior to the onset of the 2001 recession, occurs yet again prior to the onset of the 2007, 2008, 2009 recession, and now. Unlike the inverted yield curve, which has yielded some false positives, sometimes when the yield curve is inverted and yet a recession has not imminently ensued, no false positives here. This has been a flawless predictor of recession for decades, with not one false positive. And yet, there have been some other omens. The great economist Adam Smith said, among other things, quote, no society can surely be flourishing and happy of which the far greater part of the members are poor and miserable, close quote. Now, right in the late 18th century, here we are in the 21st, but one of the other precursors often to economic downturn has been an increase in income inequality. There are a number of ways, of course, to measure income inequality. Here's one. This is the percentage of income held, or share of the income, held by the top 1% of Americans dating back to 1917. So at least based on this measure, when have we observed a meaningful increase in income inequality? prior to the onset of the Great Depression in 1929. You see some of this prior to the onset of the 1991 recession. This is prior to 2001's recession. This is prior to 2007, 2008, 2009, and we've seen some of this in recent years. Unfortunately, the data series only goes through 2015. Why would this be a leading indicator of recession? Income inequality. Because the top 1% disproportionately own assets. And when those assets are performing well, let's say rising in value, appreciating in value, that triggers various forms of income, but of course most notably capital gains income. And the fact that the 1% share of income is rising, the fact that asset prices are rising so far and so fast to cause that to happen may be an indication that asset prices are rising too far and too fast relative to broader economic fundamentals. When those asset prices come crashing back down to earth, a la commercial real estate in the late 1980s, dot-coms in March of 2000, residential real estate a few years after that, that can take the rest of the economy with it. And you might find none of these omens to be especially compelling with respect to the outlook for the near-term economy in the US, but there's pretty clear evidence that the global economy is really sputtering. The International Monetary Fund has downgraded its forecast for global economic growth, not once, not twice, not thrice, but on 5 separate occasions in recent months, the last occasion being 2 weeks ago. This is the October forecast from the International Monetary Fund. Coming into this forecast, the July forecast indicated that global economic growth this year will be 3.2%. And just to put that in perspective, if that came to pass, that would represent the worst year for global economic growth since the financial crisis ended.